Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below and it'll give you a pretty good sense of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. But in short, we basically look at a particular subgenre of horror and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But today, we're doing our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series, and this is a little bit different. This is where I take a recommendation from one of you guys, a horror movie that I've never seen before, and I watch it for the first time and then decide, is it syllabus worthy? Is it worthy enough, good enough, notorious enough, interesting enough to be included on the horror movie syllabus? And today's recommendation is the movie Blink Twice. And Blink Twice was recommended by a friend of the channel, Charity, who recommended the movie saying it was really great, and with the caveat that maybe women might like it a little bit more than men, but it is definitely something that I had been interested in seeing because I had seen trailers for it in this, wonderful summer we've been having in 2024 of all of these movies, these horror movies coming out that have been really good. And this was one of the ones that I'd seen a trailer for and hadn't had a chance to get around to watching it, but I thought it was interesting. And so getting a chance to watch it for the channel with the recommendation is great. As you've noticed, we've been getting a little bit more current movies coming up on the channel, either because I wanted to watch them or because other people have recommended them. And it's been kind of cool because it's enabling me to watch these newer movies that I don't always necessarily get the time to go out and see in the theater. So that's been great. So thank you guys for that. But it's interesting, this one, because this one, I only had the trailer to go on and the scant information that Charity gave to me. And it was a lot in the trailer that I felt kind of like I knew what I was getting into going in. And while I don't think that actually wound up being true, I do feel like maybe the trailer spoiled a little bit more than it should have, but we're going to discuss all that in a little while in the video because I have thoughts on that one. I have a lot of thoughts on this movie, so why don't we go ahead and just jump right into the review and find out, did I like it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're talking about today is Blink Twice. Blink Twice came out in 2024 and was directed and co-written by Zoe Kravitz in her feature film debut. She co-wrote it with somebody named E.T. Feigenbaum. I don't really know who that is. And I do know who Zoe Kravitz is. She's pretty well known for her acting. And this is her stepping behind the camera to make her debut. And what a debut it is. There is a lot to talk about in there. And we're going to get into all of it in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie follows 2 women who work as caterers for various functions, and one of them has a fixation on a really rich CEO who's facing some bad press and trying to rehab his image. And they have a opportunity to meet this guy, and he invites them to hang out with them and then ultimately go to his private island to party and have a good time. They, of course, accept, and they are meeting a whole group of new people who seem to have a lot of interesting backstory or back relationships with each other, and they are having a good time, so much so that they don't really seem to notice that something seems to be amiss in the island, and we all, as the audience, notice it, and hijinks start to abound. But we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie too much. But the movie is an ambitious start from Zoe Kravitz, and for the most part, as a director, I think she absolutely crushes it. She just nails it. It's a very confident debut. She seems very self-assured of what it is she wants to do in this movie, in terms of the storytelling, in terms of the camera work, in terms of the characters. Everything seems to be in her control. She really has a good handle on this movie for the most part. The ending might be a question, but we'll get to that. And the work she's doing from a technical aspect is fantastic. She frames her shots beautifully. She has a really great eye for composition of shots. Things are framed really, really well. She's using color in a really wonderful way that makes you understand that she probably knows color theory pretty well. And she's using it not only to evoke the certain emotions that she maybe wants to use, but also to give it an aesthetic that feels slightly hyper real or fantastical in a way that kind of underscores the themes of the movie. She has a message that she wants to explore or themes she wants to explore, and she's going to use all of the resources available to her to explore it, including a really wonderful cast. It starts out with Naomi Ackie as the main character and Channing Tatum as the main antagonist, and their chemistry between them is fantastic. But then the cast is rounded out with a bunch of recognizable names that are all bringing really strong, wonderful performances here, including Alia Shawkat, Christian Slater, Gina Davis, Haley Joel Osment, Kyle MacLachlan from Twin Peaks. You know how I feel about Twin Peaks actors. There is a totally stacked cast here, and everybody came to play. Everybody came to deliver the goods. And like I said, Zoe's very confident here. She has complete control over what she's trying to do with this movie. And it's not easy because what she's trying to do is a little bit complex. Again, we're going to get into this in a little bit, but she's trying to thread a needle, so to speak, and I think she does it pretty masterfully for the most part. And again, for a first-time director, really impressive. This movie is a little on the long side, but it doesn't really feel long because it's extremely well paced. I actually made a note of it that the stuff doesn't really start to truly hit the fan until about 40 minutes in, and I didn't even care. I barely even noticed because things were so entertaining and fun. And that's, again, I'm going to credit Zoe Kravitz both as the director and as the writer, because she's presenting this scene or this setup that is fun, and there's all this chemistry between these characters, and they're all interesting and kind of like not necessarily big, but really rich characters that they really have a lot of arguably caricature qualities to them, but it's like a very big mismatch of different personalities. It's like a bouillabaisse of different conflicting personalities that somehow is working, and it's all like coming together as like this fun trip. But you as a viewer know that there's something wrong here. You know it's not going to end well. You know what you're watching, and so it's interesting that she was able to leverage all of this: the actors, the scene, the setup, the pacing, to keep you engaged as a viewer, get you kind of really drawn into this mystery before delivering the goods, and you don't even mind. You don't even get impatient about it because you're having a really good time. Again, credit to Zoe. Now, where the demerits might come in a little bit is the script, and it's just a little bit. It's a really interesting story. It's got an interesting setup, and it's got some social commentary meaning to it, but it could be a tighter script, if I'm being honest with you. Like, there's some things in the script that feel a little bit clunky. Some of the foreshadowing and stuff is a little unsophisticated. Like, there's a whole thing with the lighter that is very, very obvious, and actually, honestly, didn't pay off nearly as much as I would have expected it to pay off. But it is kind of almost ham-fistedly highlighted, this lighter. And there's a few other examples of this too. I don't want to get into every one of them, obviously, but there's a few things that really kind of stuck out a little bit in terms of storytelling, where you kind of realize, oh, I'm supposed to pay attention to this because it's going to be important. And of course it is, but like, it's better when you kind of don't realize that, like when your brain doesn't fixate on a plot point or a detail, and then later on that becomes important. You go, oh wait, I didn't even pay attention to that. And this movie does that too. And I want to give it credit where credit's due. The movie does set up certain things that pay off later that I kind of dismissed or kind of rationalized in my head, and it was actually kind of a major clue as to what was going on in the movie, and that was great. So it's I'm nitpicking a little bit on the script, admittedly, but it is worth mentioning because I'm pretty effusive overall about what I'm seeing on the screen. So this is the part that kind of maybe took me a little bit out of it, or took me a little bit back on it, because if I'm being honest, when I watched the movie, I had a great time. I had a fun ride. I was locked in. And then when I thought about the movie after the fact, I started realizing there's some plot holes here. There's some some stuff that doesn't make sense, that doesn't really add up. If you think about it too hard, you're going to go, this doesn't really hold together. It's kind of a house of cards. But because the pacing is really good, because this movie has a lot of fun in it, it has a lot of mystery and intrigue in it, has a lot of tension in it, you kind of blow past that. You kind of don't get really too hung up on the plot holes, which is great. It kind of papers over it, so to speak. And again, I'm going to credit Zoe with this because it's really a testament to balancing these kind of disparate ideas or themes or moods, really, between this being kind of a menacing and disturbing thriller and it being a really dark comedy. And she's kind of balancing these really well. Like, this movie is funny. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that made me actually laugh out loud. I was having a really good time with it. And then on a dime, it turns and gets really dark and really disturbing. And this all worked. It didn't feel jarring. It didn't feel like unearned or out of place. It felt like It was a logical progression of the story, balanced really, really well. Characters would kind of shift their motivations or change in personality in a way that made sense narratively and enhanced the story experience. Like there's a mean girl in there played by Adria Arjona who is really great in the movie, by the way, and she was in one of the Star Wars shows, Andor, and she is the mean girl. But as the movie goes on, her character progresses, and you get more backstory on her, and your opinion of her changes as her relationship with the other characters change, and that's just a really nice character work. Really, this is really a good way to keep you locked in the movie and care about people and keep invested in it. And this movie is doing a lot and asking a lot of its audience, and it's really for the most part accomplishing that. Now, the trailer did spoil a lot. This movie, it has a setup that is kind of familiar. It's kind of a timely, familiar message or setup. It's got a Jeffrey Epstein or Diddy kind of vibe to it. In the trailer, it really puts that front and center. It makes it very clear, and it did kind of spoil the movie a little bit, if I'm being honest with you. But I kind of don't know if I care. I don't know if it really is that big a deal. It's kind of like, so what? Because I don't think that was supposed to be a big surprise. In fact, from reading about the movie after the fact, Zoe had talked about the original title of the movie was not Blink Twice, but Pussy Island, which frankly, A, kind of a better title because it's really confrontational, and B, tips your hand as to what it is this island is about and what it is that is, going to happen and what these people are about. It really was kind of trying to be obvious about it, because I don't think she's trying to really trick you or surprise you. And I think it's really more about trying to convey a very strong, clear feminist message, which I think she succeeds at mostly until the end. Hold on to that thought for a second. So the theme it's admittedly kind of obvious. It's a feminist theme. Women should be supporting women and not kind of antagonize each other or taking each other down, but really being supportive of each other, believing each other, and protecting each other. It's a very overt thing that's literally stated in the movie. A character literally says this. So Zoe's taking no chances. She's spoon feeding the audience with this, but not in a way that felt pandering or annoying. Like we've talked about this before, where movies with a political or social message can get a little heavy-handed and clunky and ham-fisted, and it kind of takes you out of the movie, and a lot of people react very poorly to this. This movie does that, but in a way that I felt doesn't really undercut that. It doesn't do that thing where it makes you feel like you're being preached to, and I love that. I would compare this movie to Get Out in terms of this kind of message-telling thing. Get Out, another movie where the theme was very, very clear as a theme of racism, and the message was very, very clear and obvious, but it was such a fun and interesting and unsettling movie with a cool mystery underneath it, that it kept you engaged and keeps you moving, that it keeps the preachiness away, if you will. And I think Blink Twice did the exact same thing. I'm not saying that Blink Twice is as good as Get Out. It's not. But it did accomplish the same thing, where it's going to give you its message very, very obviously and bluntly, and you're going to roll with it because it's also giving you the goods. It's giving you a good time. It's giving you some comedy. It's giving you some thrills. It's giving you a mystery. It's giving you some disturbing stuff. It's really firing on all cylinders, and it's great. The issue I maybe have with this, and I know I'm not the only one, I've seen some reviews of this after the fact, is the ending. The ending seems to kind of, on first glance, it seems like it's an abrupt shift of theme and going away from feminism and girls, women standing up for each other, and switching to kind of like an absolute power kind of theme at the end. That is, it seems like it comes out of nowhere, and it seems like it undercuts everything that you just watched. It really does. But when I thought about it more, there are examples or hints or clues that this is a theme throughout the movie. They're just extremely subtle. So again, going back to that script, it might do some ham-fisted things, but it's doing some really subtle work too, because your lead character is very relatable, very likable. Again, Naomi Ackie's crushing it in this role. You like her very much, but there are things about her character that you kind of brush aside because you're with her, you like her, and you're on her side. There are some hints to her character that you're kind of like, oh. In retrospect, I see what they were doing there, and I missed it. And again, I'm trying to kind of be vague about it because I don't want to spoil it too much. I don't want to spoil the ending, but it it's there. It's not as unearned as it feels like it is when I first watched it. So I really like that. And again, I credit this a lot to Zoe, but I also really have to reiterate that everybody in this movie is really good, and the interplay between the characters is really good. So any little shortcomings of the script in terms of the not the most original story, or maybe some of these plot holes that kind of are in there, or even the shift in themes, is all you roll with all of it because the actors sell you on everything through their performances. You are buying into this premise, which is not necessarily the most grounded of premises. It is in the sense that it's based on stuff that we are seeing in the media right now. But it kind of has a fantastical element. Again, just like Get Out, there's an aspect to it that is kind of like pseudoscientific, kind of almost fantastical, and you roll with it because the performances are drawing you in, and the pacing of the movie and the direction of the movie is so solid that you're locked in. You're on this wonderful ride, and you're just enjoying it. But are you enjoying it enough? Am I enjoying it enough to make it syllabus worthy? Now let's go ahead and find out. So is Blink Twice syllabus worthy? Probably. I liked it a whole lot, and I would want to find a spot on the syllabus for it. There are two things that keep me from just being emphatically yes about it, because obviously I liked it very much. I really enjoyed this movie quite a bit. Again, the idea that maybe women would appreciate this more than men, maybe that's true, but I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was fantastic, and I would recommend it to anybody, and would watch it again. Will watch it again. It's great. The two caveats I have about just saying yes for sure, syllabus worthy. One is where to put it, because the movie is a little hard to categorize. It's hard to pin down what subgenre this movie belongs in. And there's a lot you could go with. I mean, you could just call it a thriller. You could maybe argue that there's a revenge aspect to it, or fight back. There's definitely a mind game aspect to this movie for sure. And I even on the supplement, I've got a new subgenre for vacation horror that would fit this movie fairly well too. So there's a lot of options of where to stick it. It's just which movie, which subgenre does this movie exemplify? What is like the one where it really does say this is this kind of movie? And for better and for worse, I can't say for sure. And I say for worse because it just makes it hard to categorize for purposes of a syllabus. But for better, because you're kind of getting a little bit taste of all this kind of stuff, and it's working out really, really well. It never really falls apart. I wouldn't call it like Korean horror where it's blending everything together so perfectly that you just kind of have this. It's its own thing, but it is a little bit its own thing. It really is kind of making everything work on different levels, and in a way that it all comes together very nicely, and it doesn't feel disjointed or strange or mishmashed. It all feels like it's blended together very nicely. The other caveat I would have with this movie is its staying power. This is a relatively new movie, and I'm not so sure that this movie would be considered like a classic or have be fondly remembered in 5-10 years or even just a couple years, because of how of the moment it is. It really is clearly influenced by and inspired by current events, things like Jeffrey Epstein and Diddy and stuff like that. That it's very obvious that it wants to make commentary about the current situations and the current climate. And depending on how things go in the next few years, this might be a timeless classic. This might be a movie that stands the test of time and people go back to, and might be something that's really indicative of its time, where it's like it's still set in this time period, but it's exemplifying this time period. So it still looked at in a way that it's important and relevant, even though it's of its time, or it might fade away because it is of the moment. It is something that is particularly aimed at the now, the here and now, and doesn't really stand the test of time, doesn't hold up later on. So that's the other thing that would give me pause about saying for sure it's on the syllabus. But that alone wouldn't be enough to keep it off the syllabus. I enjoyed it enough that I would be able to overlook any of these issues. I'd be able to overlook the plot holes of it. I would be able to overlook the theme switch, which again, I think you can justify it, but it is jarring. It is jarring at the end. And I'd overlook, the whole timeliness of it. And I'd find the category that I just felt fit best, and I'd put it on the HMS. I'd put it on the horror movie syllabus for sure. I think it's great. I think you should check it out if you haven't seen it already. And many of you may have. It's a very mainstream movie. It didn't do gangbusters, but it was a low enough budget that I think it's still considered a success. And Zoe Kravitz made that budget stretch. Frankly, I didn't even mention that, but she got a lot out of her money for this movie. She really made that budget look like it was much higher than it was. And so I think this movie was enough of a success that I can say that you probably saw it or at least knew about it and maybe meant to see it. So if you didn't see it, check it out because it's worth a watch, and it's got some trigger warning stuff in there. There's literally a trigger warning at the beginning of the movie. I think that the trigger warning might scare people off a little bit more than it needs to. I think that the stuff, the rough stuff that they're dealing with was done rather tastefully for the most part, showing you just enough to get you that visceral reaction, to give you that gut reaction that kind of is disturbing, but not so much that it was like glorifying it or using it to be titillating or reveling in it or anything like that. Pretty tasteful. Again, I tip my hat to Zoe on this one. She's done a great job, and I do think it's worthy of being seen. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out and let me know what you think. And if you have seen it, let me know what you think. I'm pretty high on this one, and maybe not everybody was. So if you had a different opinion about it, let me know. We'll have a civil conversation in the comments about it. But hopefully you liked it because I liked it too. So that's my thoughts on Blink Twice. And yeah, I did. I loved it. And I hope you love it too. And let's keep the conversation going in the comments below because I definitely think that it's a movie that invites conversation and merits or warrants being examined more closely and discussed and fostering discussion. So let's have that discussion. But now let's discuss this Trivia Pursuit card that I've got in my hand here. I am going to, as I always do, read a card on camera, try to answer it, and hopefully not embarrass myself. And I'm going to go with the psychological category because this movie is a psychological horror movie. It really is pretty firmly in that area. There's other, like I said, there's other things, but the psychological horror of this is a big piece of it. So here's the question. Who is the heroine in the novels by Paul Sheldon in 1990's Misery? Misery Wilkes, Misery Chastain, Misery Sheldon, or Misery Sindel? And for once, I know this one, and even though it's a name question. It's a name question, but I'm like 99% sure that I know this one. And, for those of you that watch regularly, I suck when it comes to names in movies, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just because I've seen this one a lot or whatever, but I've got the names mostly nailed down on this one, and it's helping with answering the question pretty well. And, I'm going to get into that, but I'm kind of giving you a little bit of time to think about it for yourself. Now, obviously, if you haven't seen Misery, you're taking a shot in the dark, but you've got 4 choices which to choose from. But if you haven't seen Misery, the more important thing is, why haven't you seen Misery? It's excellent. It is one of the best Stephen King adaptations. We've talked about it on the channel, of course, and it's an excellent movie. Everything about that movie works really, really well. The direction is good. The acting is phenomenal. It's Kathy Bates and James Caan, and they're both excellent in this movie. And it's mostly just the two of them, and it's a great movie. So again, if you haven't seen it before, definitely check it out. Get it. It's on. It should be part of your horror education for sure. You should have already seen it. So if you haven't seen it, hurry up and go see it and then come back and answer this question. But it'll be really easy at that point because I think the movie does a really good job of repeating names and making the names part of the dialogue in a way that you kind of just absorb it and remember it. If you're like somebody like me who sometimes remembers dialogue or lines from movies, you probably have a better chance of remembering this. So if you have seen it, maybe you remember this. It's probably not that hard of a question, but I'm pretty happy that I know it because it is, again, it's names and I don't do so well with those. So lock in your answers. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I'm going to give you my thoughts on what the answer is. Lock your answer in. Okay. So my thought is here, you've got 4 names and 2 of them are names after the characters in the movie. So one of them tells you Paul Sheldon, he's the writer, the novelist in the movie. So it's not named after him. He did not name the character after himself. So it's not Misery Sheldon. That's out. And then you have Misery Wilkes, and that's the name of the other character. That's Kathy Bates' character, Annie Wilkes, in the movie. And that's just kind of a name. She's like a horror. It's like Norman Bates. She's like a horror character icon that you kind of just know. So Misery Wilkes, that's out too. So you're down to just Misery Chastain or Misery Sindel. And I just happen to know, or just recall that it is Misery Chastain. That is the answer because that name just gets repeated throughout the movie. Like they're talking about the character throughout the movie and they're using her full name, and it's just something that sticks. It sticks because it's repeated over and over again in the movie. So I'm, like I said, 99% sure, but let's just check to make sure at 100. And Misery Chastain. I was right on that one and kind of feeling good about myself. I'm feeling myself a little bit on that one. Did you get it right too? I'm guessing a lot of you did. It's not a super hard question, but if you're crappy at names like I am, and maybe it makes you feel pretty good too. So let me know in the comments. Did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? And what did you guess if you got it wrong? But that's going to do it for this week. I really enjoyed this movie. Thank you, Charity, for the recommendation. I had promised that if I didn't like the movie, I just wouldn't do a video about it. So here it is. And I'm glad I did watch it. I hope the rest of you watch it too, because this is definitely a movie that deserves to be seen a little bit more than it has, deserves to get a little bit more of a rep. So check it out and let me know what you think. And of course, let me know what other recommendations you got for me. If there are other movies that have been coming out or older movies that I haven't seen, recommend them, and maybe we'll do a video about those too. But until then, I'm just going to say class dismissed.